Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for all things giallo here on The King in Giallo. Our next stop on our journey through giallo cinema is the final giallo film of 1965, directed by Luigi Bazzoni and Franco Rossellini. In this video, I will do a deep dive overview, then segue into a full review and GialliTally for the giallo The Possessed. The overview will be spoiler-free, the review and GialliTally will not. I'm gonna say this has been the most difficult giallo to tally so far, and I had to do another tally viewing to confirm I added all the cliches for it. But without further ado, here is The Possessed overview. The Possessed is directed by Luigi Bazzoni and Franco Rossellini, who both also co-wrote the film together with Giulio Cesti. It is based on the 1962 novel by Giovanni Comiso, La Donna del Lago, about a real series of murders. The music is done by Renzo Rossellini. The film stars Peter Baldwin as Bernard, Salvo Randoni as Enrico, Valentina Cortesa as Irma, Pia Lindstrom as Adriana, Virna Lisi as Tilda, Felipe Leroy as Mario, and Pier Giovanni Anchisi as Francesco. The plot of the film is about a writer who is down on his luck currently, named Bernard, who returns to the location he once used as his getaway to decompress from the pressures of his life, a site which is a small idyllic Italian village. This time, Bernard is focused on rekindling the romance he started with a beautiful local woman named Tilda, a person he has become beyond infatuated with, obsessed with. His hopes are dashed when he learns from the hotel owner Enrico that Tilda had taken her own life last year. Contrary to this statement, a local photographer tells Bernard that he thinks this suicidal theory is hogwash and a conspiracy covering up something greater. Bernard is on the trail now to expose the truth about Tilda's downfall and discover who, if they even exist, her killer was. Troy Howarth remarks that if Michelangelo Antonioni had made a proper giallo, it would feel like The Possessed. Sure, he dabbled around with the genre with films such as L'Avventura, 1960, and Blow Up, 1966, but in these films he does not adhere to the rules of giallo cinema, which, fair enough, weren't really established for a few more years to come. The film here by Bazzoni and Rossellini, though very serious in tone and artistic in its expression, doesn't stray out of bounds in regards to giallo conventions. Some may love this, others may deplore this. The script was written by Bazzoni, Rossellini, and Giulio Cesti, considered to be one of the most experimental Italian filmmakers of this era, who would go on to direct his own giallo, Death Laid an Egg, in 1968. The Possessed does follow a simple enough giallo plot premise, but the three writers managed to shake things up and complicate the matter by effectively blurring the line of what is reality and what is fantasy, a method which is strengthened by the talents of the editor, Nino Baragli, himself working later on Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968, directed by Sergio Leone, and Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom, 1975, directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. Baragli's style makes it rather difficult for the viewer to distinguish with absolute certainty when the protagonist is lost in his own dream world and when he is in real time, uncovering the newest clue. This dreamlike, elliptical style is exacerbated further by the black and white cinematography by Leonida Barboni and Sergio Salvati, the latter of which would do the photography and assist as camera operator for many of the beloved films of Lucio Fulci. Luigi Bazzoni, born in 1929, entered films in the late 1950s as an assistant director. In 1963, he made his first short, and The Possessed is his first credit on a feature film. He would go on to direct some of the better gialli in the genre, including the highly stylish 1971 thriller, The Fifth Chord, a giallo which contains the only sequence in any of these movies that actually had me on the edge of my seat scared, as well as the psychological thriller Footprints, or Footprints on the Moon, which Howarth says is not a giallo, but I disagree with him. He may say it doesn't qualify, I'd say it hardly does, but it does enough in my eyes, and if you disagree with me, that's fine. I understand why. That film, in my opinion, does have the greatest ending in giallo cinema, and I've rewatched the film numerous times just for the ending. Honestly, that movie feels like a psychedelic version of The Possessed, kind of. I'm getting off. Sadly, Bazzoni never received the recognition he deserved, and he eventually transitioned into documentaries before his death in 2012. Which is a shame, because I think he was one of the best giallo directors, and I wonder what giallo cinema would have been like had he had more films, rivaling the numbers of Fulci, Bava, or Martino. Franco Rossellini, born in 1935, was the nephew of the legendary Italian filmmaker Roberto Rossellini. He mostly produced, including Teorema, 1968, and The Decameron, 1971, both by Pier Paolo Pasolini, as well as City of Women, 1980, by Federico Fellini. The Possessed is his only directing credit. His father, Renzo Rossellini, was the composer on the film also. In 1992, Franco passed away due to complications involving AIDS. While it seems likely that Bazzoni and Rossellini created the script together for them to collaborate on, the fact that Bazzoni had a directing career in which he utilized some of the same storytelling techniques and stylistic devices such as in Footprints, while Rossellini's directing career never came to fruition, leads many to believe that Bazzoni was the main auteur on the film. The main role is played by American actor Peter Baldwin, who was born in 1931 and debuted on screen in 1952. Before transitioning to director, Baldwin would travel to Italy in the 1960s to act in more films. Here, he worked with Riccardo Frida in The Ghost, 1963, a gothic thriller. Later, Baldwin would appear in another giallo film, The Weekend Murders, 1970. He is known in a directing capacity for his work on The Dick Van Dyke Show and Sanford & Son. Troy Howarth notes that Baldwin's one-note portrayal of Bernard in the film is perhaps the weakest and most glaring flaw of the film. That from scene to scene, no matter how different the context of what he's engaging in, he uses the same mopey expression. Oftentimes, performances like this make it very difficult for the audience to engage with the character, let alone care about what happens to them. His performance is much more rounded out in The Ghost, so it could be that he just didn't mesh too well with Bazzoni and Rossellini. I, however, disagree with this criticism. Upon rewatching the film with this notion in mind, I don't think his performance hurts the film. As an actor myself with a BFA in acting, I think Baldwin made a choice, and I think the choice he made is very telling about the character of Bernard and where he's at in life. There are a few moments where I'd have given the character a bit more variance if I were playing him, but I think he did make a solid choice, and I think it reflects the characterization just fine. Bernard seems very depressed and disinterested with putting on airs for others, especially considering he doesn't trust anyone in the small town anymore. The character is not as complex as Hamlet, but I don't think Peter Baldwin's performance is stagnant or one note. I think it is fitting, and I do care what happens to him, and I hope that he receives closure, but the given circumstances of his situation reveal a character who is at their lowest point, and they return to this place to rekindle something within them that they feared they may have lost, only to discover upon arrival that their attempts are in vain, and the only thing left for them is uncovering the truth, and then walking away and moving onwards in life. I find something very resonant in his portrayal of a depressed person, as well as a man who tries to resolve the mystery of a woman's demise, a woman whom he cared deeply about, despite her not reciprocating his feelings. Is he doing it for her or for himself? Therein lies the rub. Tilda, the object of Bernard's affection, is played by Verna Lisi, born in 1936, who during filming was trying to become the new Italian sex goddess, but her career ultimately did not end up unfolding as such, aside for a short run in the 1960s, including acting in How to Murder Your Wife, 1965, where she acted opposite Jack Lemmon, and Casanova 70, 1965, where she acted opposite Marcello Mastroianni. In this film, she unfortunately does not have a lot to do other than behave as an object of desire for the hero to avenge. Salvo Randoni, born in 1906, steals the show in The Possessed as the hotelier with a secret. He entered films in the 1940s and acted in Salvatore Giuliano, 1962 by Francesco Rossi, Fellini Satyricon, 1969 by Federico Fellini, and Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, 1970 by Elio Petri. He appeared in one more giallo, the underrated My Dear Killer, 1972. He is perhaps the best cast individual in the picture, and his performance attempts to compensate for the lack of talent on display in the leading role. Again, not my opinion. He died in 1991. Valentina Cortese plays the hotelier's daughter. She appeared in a few other gialli, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, 1963 by Mario Bava, and The Iguana with the Tongue of Fire, 1971 by Riccardo Frida. While Cortese can sometimes be a bit over the top, here she is more restrained and it serves the film. Felipe Leroy plays the hotelier's son with a bad temper, Mario. He was born in 1930 and debuted in La True, 1960, by Jacques Becker, and would go on to act as the lead in Castle of the Living Dead, 1964, which starred Christopher Lee, as well as debuting Donald Sutherland. He also appeared in Yankee, 1966, by Tinto Brass, The Frightened Woman, 1969, by Piero Schivazzappa, Caliber 9, 1972, by Fernando De Leo, and The Night Porter, 1974, by Liliana Cavani. His other giallo acting credits include Devil's Ransom, 1970, and Circle of Fear, 1992. Plus, he also appeared in Dario Argento's final film in the Three Mothers trilogy, Mother of Tears, 2007. The film premiered at the Swiss Locarno Festival on July 24th, 1965, then premiered in Italy on August 14th, 1965. It grossed 100,160,000 lira domestically, which is considered to be a poor commercial performance, the result of which prompted producer Manolo Bolognini to approach director Sergio Corbucci to make a new spaghetti western film in order to recoup the losses from The Possessed. The product he created was 1966's Django. The Possessed, or La Donna del Lago, the Lady of the Lake, aired on American television as Love, Hate, and Dishonor. The film under this name is referenced on a radio spot in Quentin Tarantino's 2019 film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Murder, revenge, and passionate intrigue. Bernalice stars in the Los Angeles television premiere of Love, Hate, and Dishonor, Saturday at 9 on KHJ TV.
There is another film based on the same true crime event entitled Celui l'Ombre from 2003. If you are interested in learning more about the true crime events that inspired the film, look up the Alleghi murders and the Detos family. But I digress. On to the review. Spoilers ahead for those of you who haven't yet seen the film. You've been warned. I'm going to predict that The Possessed will fall behind in the standings for cliché points, possibly even behind The Telephone, which is around 25 minutes in duration. Beginning as always with the pre-viewing clichés. The repeat offenders are 1 point for actor, 3 for writer, 3 for composer, and 5 for director. Valentina Cortese was in The Girl Who Knew Too Much, 1 point. Luigi Bazzoni will go on to direct some of the best gialli behind the big four in the genre, but this here is his first one directed, so no points just yet. Cliché points for the title? We have no points. First look, we have 25 points for the Italian director, and an additional 15 points for the influence bonus of this being a proto-giallo. And would you look at that, it is plot o'clock. The film opens with a cold open, 5 points. T is for telephone, 5 points. We open with our protagonist, Bernard, talking on the phone to one of his flings, so it seems. The conversation leads us to believe that it's not doing it for him anymore, and he's deeply depressed in life. See what I mean by the state of mind of the character? In my opinion, that the performance is actually very appropriate.
Ti voglio bene, lo sai.
Sì, lo so, lo so.
Cold. She hangs up on his indifferent ass, and we get our title card for the film. And I rather prefer this title. The Possessed is great too, and its meaning is not lost on me, but The Lady of the Lake seems more ominous strangely. Yet, both titles reflect the obsession of Bernard and others. Hell, let's just count it now. O is for obsession, 5 points. Bernard arrives by car in this small Italian town, and I couldn't find where this was filmed, or else I'd give it points for Italian locales. We get our first dose of narration, which will be an ongoing thing for this film. He enters the hotel, rings the buzzer, and is greeted by the hotelier. The two men know each other. Bernard has stayed here before. We learn the hotel is in its off-season, and Bernard will practically have the hotel to himself. Exposition dumping, 2 points. Bernard declines the offer of their best room in favor of the same room he had had the year before, room 29 on the first floor. For the Americans at home, that's the second floor. They discuss the hotel's restoration and how Bernard prefers the vintage look, to which the hotelier compliments his old school taste. He's brought into his room, looks out the window, and sees the slaughterhouse outside, to which the hotelier says it is owned by his son, Mario, who just got married 2 weeks ago. The newlyweds should be back tomorrow. This is Enrico, by the way, who goes on to say he bought the plot for his son to keep him busy. Enrico remarks that they need another woman around to help run the admin, but unfortunately for him, he's too old to remarry. He leaves Bernard, saying as he goes out that he can ring the bell for the maid if he wants for anything. Now alone, Bernard pulls out some photographs from an envelope and smiles as he looks at a beautiful blonde woman. His narration takes over. We learn that she is his reason for returning, that she was a maid and her name was Tilda. He rings the buzzer and waits for Tilda, but a different maid opens the door. Taken aback, Bernard asks for a bottle of mineral water, and that's all. She leaves. He tosses the photos on the bed. While perusing the hotel, Bernard spies the coat Tilda wore, and he's relieved to know that she's still working here. He's caught by the daughter of Enrico, Irma, played by Valentina Cortesa, last seen on the channel in The Girl Who Knew Too Much. He makes up a white lie to cover for his snooping by saying he couldn't find the stairs, which is obviously a lie since he's been there numerous times. L is for lies, 5 points. There'll be other lies later, but let's just count it now. Hell, I'll also give F is for fashion for the coat. 5 points. She shows him the staircase as they chit-chat. Bernard says he'll be here for about a month. Bernard takes a walk and we get another narration. He remarks that he's invigorated by the inevitable meeting with Tilda. He's interrupted by a man knocking on a window to grab his attention. The man invites him into the restaurant. This man works for the local newspaper. He mentions his stories are mostly dog bites man, and the only excitement is the result of the treacherous lake, which still claims lives every once in a while. This other man is a doctor, who tells him the lake covers up the ruins of an ancient town. Bernard says he knows, because he's visited since childhood. The newspaper man says he's never read that in any of his books, and that Bernard must have an issue with writing from within. He assures them, though, that this new book is centered around his memories of this place, but this thought is interrupted by what appears to be Tilda walking by. He follows her to a shop, but when she turns to face him, it's not her, only the other maid. Bernard goes into a photo studio where he meets with an old acquaintance, Francesco. Francesco congratulates him on receiving the Paris Award, but notes that Bernard seems like he was afraid of not finding an answer for everything. The scene closes on them looking at a picture of Mario and his new wife, a rich, lonely, and beautiful foreigner. While eating at the hotel, Bernard laments on why he hasn't seen Tilda and why that woman was wearing her coat. Enrico comes to the table and checks in on him. Bernard asks him about Tilda. Q is for questions. 5 points. Enrico tells him that Tilda is dead from poison she took last December, but when asked why, the answer he receives is, who knows? Irma interrupts them, but can offer Bernard nothing more. Bernard is tortured by this news. He asserts that his notion of peace is gone now, and all he can think about is this memory he has of her. We get our first dream sequence. Bernard is at a graveyard covered in snow. He sees Tilda walking and follows her. He follows her into the hotel, and we get these incredible POV shots. POV shot, in this case, of a voyeur. 5 points. He finds a room with a sliver in it, allowing a view into the neighboring room. He peers in. E is for eyeballs. 5 points. V is for voyeur. 5 points. He watches a naked Tilda, although we don't see nudity, sorry, no points, as she has sex with an unknown man. These sex scenes are played with a mutedness, except for some spooky animal sounds. Incredible sound design. He is awoken by a man calling out in the night. Y is for yelling. 5 points. The man yelling is either sick or drunk, and he curses the hotel and the people inside, conceivably the owners. The next day, Bernard takes a walk to Francesco's. He asks Francesco why he didn't mention Tilda's death, to which he is told because he didn't ask about her, and that Francesco assumed he'd heard. He doesn't want to discuss it because of the rumors surrounding the circumstances. Apparently, poison was found in her stomach and on her mouth, but her throat was slashed. Francesco tells Bernard that there is something he must show him. He shows him a photo of Tilda days before her demise, which she had brought to be developed. In the photo, clear as day, we can see Tilda heavy from pregnancy. Francesco says he is not alone in the community for believing that her death was foul play, but everyone is too scared to speak out because of how powerful and dangerous Enrico is. The knife used belonged to Enrico. Plus, there were already numerous rumors about the two of them when she was still alive. When asked about the police investigation, he is told that they ruled it as nothing suspicious. The autopsy even showed that she was a virgin. Money talks. Bernard says he knows for certain she was not a virgin, but not because of the photo, but because he saw her making love to a man last year, but he doesn't know who the man is. But he is certain that it was not Enrico, because the man appeared to be young and fit. Francesco says all she had was her father, who was a drunk, who lives in the mountains like a vagabond and comes down to raise hell. Bernard requests to meet with her father so he can learn all he can. When asked if he came back for Tilda, he responds, yes, only her. Add extra points to O is for obsession for the amateur sleuth being obsessed. That's another 5 points. While back at the hotel dining room, Bernard sends back a fish dinner which was claimed to have been caught fresh in the lake, but he says it stinks. I think this scene is here for this reason primarily. Say it with me now, symbolism. He's washing up, and his narration discusses being disgusted with Enrico now, thinking of him as Tilda's lover. When he's walking upstairs, he is stopped by Enrico, who apologizes to him, to which Bernard says he just doesn't have an appetite. Behind Enrico is Irma, who seems visibly distraught. Z is for zoom, 5 points. He asks Enrico if Tilda had a boyfriend. He says he doesn't know and asks why he asked that. Bernard says because she was very pretty, to which Enrico agrees. Bernard looks suspiciously at Enrico and excuses himself to bed. In his room, Bernard is analyzing what Enrico said and how he said it. He believes he may be involved. As he drinks more and more, he proclaims that he must know who Tilda is and what she was really like, as well as that her memory haunts him. Another dream sequence. Or is it? Bernard kisses Tilda before she exits his room. H is for hallucinations, 5 points. I grant this as a hallucination because I believe that this is a daydream, and I believe that this is grief-induced. Weird, I know. Bernard is brought out of his daze and looks in the hallway where he spies Mario and his wife walking through. The two do not look happy, and it is very clear that something is amiss between them. Again, he sees that Irma is visibly upset. In what is a dream, or possibly not, Irma confides that their good family name has been dishonored, and he knows why. Cut to Tilda lying on a bed with her throat slashed. Irma confesses that it was her who discovered Tilda. Bernard awakens. He hears a very strange noise and goes to the window to check. Outside at the slaughterhouse, he sees Mario hacking away at a slab of meat. He catches an awkward moment between Mario and his wife as he peers up at her window to find her looking down at him in horror before turning away and moving from the window. Later that day, Bernard visits Tilda's grave. When he sees her picture on her grave, he suddenly has a vision of Tilda making love to Mario, then to Enrico. The ordeal seems a bit violent, but not necessarily forced. Necking, 5 points. Maybe she was a bit of a Laura Palmer type. He leaves the graveyard. While walking about the town, he sees Adriana, Mario's wife, walking alone, forlornly along the shore of the lake. When he returns to the hotel, Enrico tells him there is a letter for him. The letter is from Francesco, urging Bernard to meet him for a fishing trip. A passing comment from Irma reveals that Adriana is not well, and Enrico claims she's been sick. I'll be generous with this one. X is for xenophobia, 5 points. That remark could get a pass, but I could also see someone taking offense to it also. Bernard receives his key and goes upstairs to his room. Immediately, we cut to him sitting in a boat with Francesco. Francesco has him look at Adriana, who continues her lamenting along the shoreline. When Bernard claims that Francesco is imagining things, Francesco tells him that he is just afraid to learn the truth about Tilda and what she was really like. They argue for a bit before the whole scene is revealed to be a dream. Character takes prescription pills or sedatives, I'm guessing? 5 points. He spies Adriana once again walking along the shore, rereads the letter, and meets Francesco for real. Francesco tells him he invented the ruse of them fishing so the people of the hotel wouldn't become suspicious of their meeting. Francesco mentions that the whole town's talking about Adriana's walks, that it speaks of a failing marriage. He also tells him that the town is afraid of Mario because he's violent. As they are approaching the dwelling of Tilda's father, they spy Mario leaving the premises. They walk in and try to talk to him. His name is Saverio. Saverio will not tell them any information. They ask if he was threatened by the hotel people. He just looks up at them with tears streaming down his face as he repeats, "I don't know anything." They leave, defeated. Saverio watches on as they exit. Later in the dining room, Bernard watches on as Mario, Adriana, Irma, and Enrico sit at the end of the room and have dinner. Adriana is obviously troubled.
Mangia, Adriana. Mangia, ehi! Mangia!
The whole situation feels like a ruse to show how happy they are. Adriana looks up and makes eye contact with Bernard, then looks away. But then she looks at him again. Enrico gives Bernard a paper, then remarks how she is feeling better, but apparently she's ill and that she ought to have told Mario before marrying him. Bernard says he's feeling ill himself, possibly with a fever, to which Enrico says that he must have caught sickness out in the mountains this morning. That's a little suspicious. Enrico excuses himself, and when Bernard turns to look back at the family, they're all gone. Back in his room, Bernard has indeed caught a fever. He goes to the window, looks out and sees Adriana staring at him. She seems desperate to talk to him. She tosses a note out the window for him to retrieve, then removes herself from the window. But before Bernard can find the letter, it is no longer there. Only Mario, who watches on as Bernard walks about the courtyard. Later that night, Bernard waits at the same stretch of shore where he's repeatedly seen Adriana walking along. She appears, but Bernard is seen by a young couple who hides themselves behind a tree. Adriana takes off. He goes back to the hotel where he sees the light from their window going out. Ominous. He drinks some more and questions why she didn't want to talk to him just then. The next day, the doctor confirms his fever. For the next several days, Bernard is sick in bed, losing all sense of time and the world outside his room, while being cared for by Irma. He is broken out of his stupor by a police detective. He tells him to get dressed and meet him in the hall, and that there is urgent business they must attend to. We get a hilarious edit of the cop leaving the room. I don't know why. Like, in case we didn't believe that he actually did in fact leave the room. Look, the director shows you he did. M is for morgue, 5 points. The detective shows him the body of Adriana. They say that they dragged her body out of the lake this morning. They tell him they need him to give a statement just as a formality. The detective tells him that witnesses saw the two of them meeting days ago. I'm gonna hold off on giving W is for witness right now, because to me, a witness in terms of the cliche is watching someone being murdered. Bernard says he'd seen her walking around a number of times, but never had a chance to speak with her, and that her behavior struck him as very odd. When asked if he thinks she was a sleepwalker, he says no, that theory seems like a supposition, but he wouldn't rule it out. We get a brief flashback to her trying to talk with him, but he decides not to tell them, either believing it's futile or not trusting the integrity of the police in this small town.
Tutto mi sembrava inutile.
Oh, apparently it's reason number 1. He peeks into the morgue once more, remarking on how something dark was sweeping over the family. Extra points for M is for morgue, for the morgue being seen more than once. Extra 5 points. Funeral scene. Yes, it is a procession and not an official funeral, but to me it's all the same. 2 points. P is for priest. I almost didn't count this one, but there's one plain as day. 5 points. During a funerary procession for Adriana, Bernard walks away from his viewing of it, notices the coat of Adriana, which prompts another brief flashback. His inner monologue questions why she wasn't wearing it when he saw her on the shore. While the entire family is out of the hotel, Bernard looks for evidence at the concierge desk. Enrico seems distraught and abandons the funeral procession. In the trash, Bernard finds a note that says, "It's absolutely necessary," and another piece which simply says, "Absolutely." In the desk, he finds 2 photos of Adriana. Odd clue, 5 points. He observes Enrico entering the hotel and going into Tilda's old room. Knowing he can see inside, Bernard goes to the adjacent room to peer inside through the hole in the wall. He spies Enrico lamenting Tilda and saying, "Why?" repeatedly, followed by, "Your fault." Bernard seems convinced that Enrico is responsible for Tilda now. He stumbles about the halls, then thinks to himself what must be the connection between the 2 deaths. He is taken by an idea, as we get a nice Bava-esque transition via focus racking out. He imagines Enrico discovering that Tilda was pregnant and her immediately blackmailing his family. This thought is broken by Mario and Irma returning inside. Bernard calls up Francesco and demands to meet with him ASAP to tell him of his findings, but Francesco wants nothing more to do with this conspiracy, clearly frightened into quitting. The phone call is interrupted by Mario, who presses him. Bernard says he has some photos he must pick up, but Mario asserts that it is cold and windy out and that he should stay inside, and offers that he will go for him. Mario says he needs to speak with Bernard, but they are in turn interrupted by Irma. Bernard seizes the moment to excuse himself, but Irma stops him, apologizing for any inconveniences during his stay. She says all their guests have left. She's dismissed the staff, and now her father is acting strange. She says the rumors will be the death of her father. Irma then says she must take her father away to recover his health and also close the hotel for several months. and she asks if it is not too much trouble if he can check out right away. He says that's fine, then leaves. Bernard goes to the photo studio, but it's locked and he cannot find Francesco. He checks the departing trains but cannot ascertain for certain if Francesco is on board. He rushes back to the hotel, has another drink, and packs his bags. He looks upon the photo of Tilda one last time and then rips it into pieces, severing this part of his life off. With his bill, he finds a letter from Mario asking to speak with him at the slaughterhouse later that night at 11. His watch says it's minutes after 10. Bernard enters the slaughterhouse. He is met by Mario. Mario is holding something horrible inside. He says he would have told Bernard everything had he allowed them to talk, and that maybe then he could have gotten some help. He says, like his father, he cannot bear to keep the secret anymore. S is for secrets. 5 points. Mario says he didn't want Tilda to die. His father ordered him to marry her, but he said no, but he couldn't bear to share her with his father anymore, not as his wife. But Tilda was blackmailing his family. Through a flashback, we see Mario, possessed, going to kill Tilda with a straight razor. He blames her for her own death. He says he didn't want her to die, nor Adriana. He confesses one night he told his wife out of grief, but he didn't want her to die. It was her own fault. K is for knife, 5 points. This is revealed to be a dream once again. I think this is supposed to be Bernard imagining himself being killed by Mario because of the male scream. I honestly don't know. Bernard approaches the window and sees Adriana standing outside by the lake. He rushes down to talk to her. When he finally reaches her, it's not her, it's Irma. She says no one will betray her again. She's covered in blood and says no one will sully her family's name ever again. She demands to be let go, that she must die. She says it was her who was wearing the same white coat days ago when he thought he saw Adriana. Add U is for undercover, 5 points. Hidden identity of the killer until the final moments, 5 points. She says that Adriana wanted to talk, but they wouldn't allow her, that Mario had to kill her. She bites him and breaks free, screaming that she loved them, that their family name is spared, and it's all over. Extra points for Y is for yelling for a hysterical woman. 5 points. Bernard foolishly wipes the blood off on himself, then rushes back to the hotel in the slaughterhouse. Extra points for Z is for zoom on a dead victim, another 5 points. He finds both Enrico and Mario dead. The killer is killed by someone, 10 points. Betrayal by the killer, 5 points. The next day, he's once again signing a statement as a formality. The detective assures him there won't be a trial because they likely will not find Irma alive. He says where Irma fell in the water is both very deep and the bottom is covered in thick vegetation, and they've only found her coat. The detective dismisses him, and Bernard drives out of town, stopping only to briefly watch the divers as they continue their search in the lake. He drives out of town, leaving behind all his bad memories and anguish, but what is there waiting for him back in his normal life? How can he even sum up his life right now? Yeah, that seems appropriate. And that's The Possessed. I really like this movie. I will say it is a bit slow, but not too slow. But regardless, it does not overstay its welcome, as it is only around an hour and 20-something minutes. The movie is one of the softer giallo types, meaning it is easily not a giallo depending on who you talk to, but it is. It is very one of a kind. If Blood and Black Lace is the creme giallo, The Possessed is the noir giallo. I will say that despite not being overly violent or mean-spirited, I think I can safely say that this giallo, more so than any other one, leaves me with a sense of sadness. And I don't mean that in a bad way. The film accomplishes this as if that's how some events in our life are. You don't get the closure you seek, and sometimes the best thing for you to do is to close the door and walk away from this chapter of your life, never to look back. It feels like the end of what was a great relationship or friendship that has just reached its peak, and what once was can no longer be salvaged or reconciled. Let me explain some of the cliches I didn't give. I don't give W's for witness because for me, the cliche implies someone observing a murder happening. I don't give R's for reporter because the newsman isn't quite a reporter, or if he is, he doesn't act in the capacity of one in the only scene he's involved in. I don't give Italian locales nor urban locales because I simply couldn't find where the film was shot on location, and regardless of that, its location isn't a well-known site within Italy, nor is the location a true urban center like a city. It's a small town. I don't give points for mistaken identity of the killer because Bernard never fully suspects Enrico is responsible for the murder nor do the police. Primarily, Bernard suspects that Enrico's involved and is hiding something. I don't give Bernard points for psychic visions, despite them being fairly prophetic, nor do I give Irma points for a woman outmuscles a man, simply because she bit him to break free. I don't give A's for alibi because one is never given. The police do not suspect Bernard and don't ask for his, and when Enrico is making up lies about Adriana being sick, this does not constitute an alibi, as the definition of an alibi is providing a location against where a crime was committed. And finally, I don't give points for incompetent police, because the police, if anything, are being bought off. Thank you for sticking around. Let's segue to the GialliTally cliches for this movie. Post-giallo viewing cliches. The reason for the killings, well, the first one is because of being blackmailed, but after that, the next kill is to keep someone silent, and after that, the killings from Irma are kind of due to psychopathy. I can only choose one, so I'll go for the latter. Mental illness, psychopathy, obsession. 7 points. The reason for the investigation. Revenge or obsession due to losing someone to the killer. 10 points. Extra points for amateur sleuth. Yes, 5 points. Bonus points. The style bonus. The movie has its fair share of crash zooms, there's a focus rack as a dissolve, there are POV shots, and there are film effects during the dream sequences. The fact this movie looks so mesmerizing while being shot in black and white is incredible. Easily, it is the best use of black and white in the Giallo films so far. I will give it 19 points. Soundtrack. This soundtrack is not as Giallo-esque as others. I wouldn't even say this soundtrack is Giallo-esque at all. It's good. I do like it, and I especially like the track that reminds me of Veres Leta Facies. But I wouldn't say the soundtrack is cliched for the Giallo genre, so this is the first movie I won't be giving these points to. Bad effects? No, there are none. No points. Final look. Extra points. The Deadpool, tallying how many kills and deaths are featured in the film. We don't have anybody seen being killed in this one, but we do have dead victims discovered. I break it down as thus. 10 points per kill or death seen for the main Deadpool, plus any stylistic kill multipliers, which we didn't add just yet, plus the knife kill bonus, which this movie does not have any. I'm gonna say it here that these first 2 deaths are mentioned, but through the magic of cinema, we see how they occurred via a dream. Despite being in Bernard's imagination, I trust the movie that these are fairly accurate to what happened. I have to say that this movie puts me in a weird way with tallying these, but I'll be generous for them. Tilda, we see her throat slit, which is an extra 7 points for a total of 17 points. Note, despite Francesco saying it was from a knife, we don't ever see that, but we do see a straight razor, so no points for a knife kill. Adriana. In the dream, we see that Mario seems to have either choked her using his hands, or he possibly strangled or smothered her. Because of the muffling sound effect, I'm gonna say smothered, which is an extra 3, so 13 points total. Enrico. Found dead with a pool of blood around his head. I'll say bludgeoned, which is an added 5, so 15 points total. Mario. Found with blood dripping from his head. Again, bludgeoned. 15 points total. Extended Deadpool for those other deaths mentioned but not seen. I'll give 3 points for each. Irma. We don't have confirmation that she is dead, but like libido, it seems heavily implied, so I'll add 4 for drowning for a total of 7 points here. Okay, let me just say, I counted Irma in the extended Deadpool versus the main Deadpool for this movie because we don't see the circumstances leading up to her demise. However, in Libido, I included Brigitta in the main Deadpool because we saw how she was bound to die. These last 2 movies, man, they bend the rules and play their own game, and they are rough tallying. Red herrings for the total number of legitimate suspects in the film. 5 points per legit suspect are rewarded. For me, these are Enrico, Mario, and Irma. No one else struck me as suspicious, and had someone else been responsible, I would have been disappointed and deceived. 3 characters, Enrico, 5 points. Mario, 5 points. Irma, 5 points. Flashback sequences. We have a few. Now, I count flashbacks of any sort as 5 points. Any sort meaning whether they are thoughts, dreams, or spurred on by drugs or alcohol. This is so difficult because there are so many dreams which merge with actual flashbacks and other flashbacks which are within an imagination, so bear with me here. Bernard's first dream of spying on Tilda. This is an absolute flashback. 5 points. Bernard's dream of briefly hooking up with Tilda. I don't know if this is factually something that happened or this is him imagining it. He doesn't seem to actually have had an intimate relationship with Tilda, and I believe it is all fantasy. So, I'm sorry, I'm not counting this one. This brief flashback involving Adriana, 5 points. This brief flashback involving the coat, 5 points. In his dream about Mario confessing his murders, we have 2 flashbacks, one of Tilda's murder and one of Adriana's murder. Because this is a dream and the memories of Mario are completely outside of Bernard's own thoughts, I'm sorry again, but I do not count these 2 flashbacks because I can't verify their validity. These are not flashbacks from Bernard's own memory. These are him imagining something. Thank you for bearing with me. And there is no nudity, so no points there. Ladies and gentlemen, for The Possessed, I awarded the film an A to Z score of 16 out of 26. With the bonus points for these, we have a modified score total of 100 points. And for the full GialliTally score, I award The Possessed a GialliTally score of 328 points. Compared to The Girl Who Knew Too Much in first with 452 points, Blood and Black Lace in second with 422 points, Libido in third with 407 points, The Possessed is in fourth, ahead of The Telephone in last with 254 points. I predicted before doing the tallying that The Possessed would end up about where it did, but during the tallying I started wondering if it would actually score much higher than it did. In the end, it did very modest for the cliches, but did have more than I thought it would. But like I stated earlier, these points don't mean a movie is better or worse. Don't forget the audience submissions. Seriously, for these film reviews, I will be accepting memes you, the viewer, submit to me created from still shots or GIFs from the movie with some accompanying text. A meme. The best ones I will feature in the follow-up video whilst giving you a shout out for your submission. And honestly, you send me anything, you're going to be featured in the next video because you'll probably be the only one. I will also separately be accepting the best still shots from the film, inspired by the idea of every frame being a painting. This portion will be called Giallo Shots. Submit any of your memes or best film frames for The Possessed to me at icaruscrispy@gmail.com. Please leave a comment in any of my videos letting me know you've sent a submission so I can go look at it. And lastly, please like this video, share it with your friends if they are horror fans or cinephiles or you think they would be interested in Giallo. Subscribe to The King in Giallo if you haven't yet, and if you have any questions, thoughts, curiosities, or concerns, leave those below in the comment section and I will get back to you. Give The King in Giallo a follow on Instagram and a like on Facebook. Next time on The King in Giallo will be episodes 5, 6, and 7 of the Forgotten Giallo film series covering the years of 1966, 1967, and 1968, as well as the overview, review, and GialliTally video for 1968's Death Laid an Egg, directed by one of the 3 screenwriters of this film, The Possessed, Giulio Chesti. Thank you very much for your continued support. As always, this is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I hope to see you next time.